There is one verse in the Bible that critics have used for over 100 years to argue that Jesus was simply wrong. Not a hard verse, not a confusing verse. A verse they say he made a prediction that failed. Matthew 24:34. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. The argument goes like this. Jesus said the generation standing in front of him would see the end of the world. That generation died. The end never came. Therefore, Jesus was mistaken. And if he was mistaken about that, you cannot trust him about anything else. That is a serious charge, and it deserves a serious answer. But here is the problem. Most of the answers you will hear do not come from the Bible. They come from a system. Someone builds a prophecy chart first, and then they go back and squeeze Matthew 24 into it. We are going to do the opposite today. By the end of this video, you will know the three main ways Christians have understood this verse. You will see every place Matthew uses this exact phrase, so you can check the pattern yourself. You will know what the Greek word actually means and what it does not mean. And you will see the one word in this verse that almost nobody argues about, even though the entire debate depends on it. We are going to put all three views on trial, not against tradition, not against famous prophecy teachers, against scripture. This is pure Bible. We go to the text. To understand this verse, you have to know where Jesus was standing when he said it. Matthew 24 opens with the disciples walking out of the temple, and they do what any visitor will do. They point at the buildings. Look at this stonework. Look at the size of it. The temple was one of the great structures of the ancient world. Herod has spent decades on it. Some of those stones weighed more than a modern truck. And Jesus says something that must have stopped them where they stood. Matthew 24:2. You see all these, do you not? Truly, I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Every stone torn down. They walk in silence up the Mount of Olives. And when they sit down, they ask him a question. Actually, they ask three. Matthew 24:3. Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Read that slowly because most people miss it. Question 1. When will the temple be destroyed? Question 2. What will be the sign of your coming? Question 3. What will be the sign of the end of the age? 3 questions. And the disciples almost certainly assumed all three would happen at the same time. To them, the temple falling and the world ending were the same event. Everything that follows in Matthew 24 is the answer to those 3 questions. And the whole debate over verse 34 comes down to this. Was Jesus answering one question at a time or all 3 at once? Now, before we open the text, I want to say thank you to Jim Henkel. Jim sent in this question, and it is the reason we are doing this study today. He could have gotten a 2-line reply in the comments. Instead, we are opening the Bible together. So if there is a passage that has puzzled you or a verse you have heard taught 3 different ways, do what Jim did. Put it in the comments. Yours could be the next one we study. Now, let us go to the text. There are 3 main ways Christians have understood the phrase, this generation. Let me lay them out plainly, and then we will test each one. View 1. Jesus meant the people alive in front of him. He was talking to his own generation, and the prophecy was fulfilled when Rome destroyed Jerusalem in AD 70, about 40 years after he spoke. Well within a normal lifetime. View 2. Jesus is answering more than one question, and he is speaking about more than one time period. Part of what he says is about Jerusalem. Part of it is about his return at the end of the age. So this generation points to whichever generation is alive when each set of events happens. View 3. Generation does not mean a generation at all. It means the Jewish people as a race. Jesus was promising that the Jewish nation will survive until every prophecy is fulfilled. 3 views. Now let us test them. The first test. How does Matthew use this phrase everywhere else. This is one of the safest rules in Bible study. If you want to know what an author means by a phrase, look at how the same author uses it in the same book. Matthew uses this generation repeatedly before we ever reach chapter 24. Watch the pattern. Matthew 11:16. But to what shall I compare this generation? Jesus is describing the people standing in front of him. Matthew 12:39. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign. His contemporaries again. Matthew 12:41. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. Same group. Matthew 12:45. So also will it be with this evil generation. Same. Matthew 16:4. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign. Same. Matthew 17:17. Oh, faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? The people right there in front of him. And then one chapter before the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 23:36. Truly, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Almost nobody disputes that one. Jesus is talking about the people of his own day. So here is our first finding, and it is significant. Every single time Matthew uses this generation before chapter 24, it means the people alive during the ministry of Jesus. Not once does it mean the Jewish race. Not once does it mean believers across history. Not once does Matthew redefine it. That is a strong pattern, which means anyone who wants to give the phrase a different meaning in Matthew 24 carries the burden of proof. The second test, what does the word actually mean? The Greek word is Genea. The BDAC gives Genea two main senses. The primary one is people born and living at roughly the same time, a generation, exactly the way we use the word. The second sense is a group defined by a shared character, which is why you get phrases like a wicked generation or a crooked generation. And the BDAC is clear that this second sense is about moral and spiritual character, not about a race or bloodline. Now, notice what is not on that list. The BDAC does not list the Jewish nation as a normal meaning of Genea. And this matters because Greek had perfectly good words for that. If a New Testament writer wanted to say race or family line, he had Genos. If he wanted to say nation or ethnic people, he had Ethnos. That is the word behind our English word ethnic, and it is all over the New Testament. Make disciples of all ethnic, all nations. Jesus did not use either of those words. He used Genea. So what happens to view 3? It does not survive the test. Matthew never uses the phrase that way. The lexicon does not support that meaning. And Greek had two other words available if that is what Jesus meant. Now, is God faithful to the Jewish people? Absolutely. And Romans 11 says so directly. That is a real biblical teaching. But it is not what this verse is saying. And on this channel, we do not defend a good doctrine with a verse that does not teach it. View 3 is out. That leaves views 1 and 2. And view 1 just picked up serious support because Matthew's own usage points that direction 7 times out of 7. So it looks like the case is closed, except it is not. And here is where almost everyone goes wrong. And I include some very good teachers in that. Both sides of this debate spend all their energy fighting over one word: generation. What does generation mean? Does it mean 40 years? Does it mean a race? Does it mean the last generation? That is the wrong fight, because there are two words in this verse that decides the answer, and hardly anyone argues about the second one. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. All these things. That is the hinge. That is where the whole question actually turns. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let me show you why with a simple example. Suppose I say this family will inherit the house. Now, has the word family changed its meaning? Of course not. Family means family. It always did. But which family I am talking about depends entirely on who I have been describing. That is the difference between what a word means and who the word points to. The meaning stays fixed, the target can move. So apply that here. Generation always means a group of people alive at the same time. That never changes. That is what Matthew means every time. And that is what the be that says. And that is what Jesus means in verse 34. The only question is which generation? And the answer to that is not found in the word generation at all. It is found in the phrase right beside it. Which generation? The one that sees all these things. So we do not have to change the meaning of a single word. We just have to find out what Jesus packed into the phrase all these things. And Jesus tells us he does not leave us guessing. He gives us an illustration on purpose right before verse 34. Pay attention to the order here. Jesus gives the whole prophecy first, then he gives the picture. The picture is there to explain the prophecy. Matthew 24, 32 and 33. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. And when Jesus says, learn its lesson, he is telling you plainly, this is how you are supposed to read what I just said. So what does the fig tree teach? Leaves come out, and you know summer is close. You do not need an announcement. You do not need a calendar. The sign itself tells you the season. And now watch how tightly that connects. The leaves and the summer belong to the same year. You do not see the leaves in 1 century and get summer 2,000 years later. That will destroy the whole illustration. So when Jesus says the generation that sees the signs will not pass away before the signs are fulfilled, he is saying exactly what the fig tree says. The people who watch it start are the people who watch it finish. Now notice the phrase Jesus keeps repeating through this chapter. Verse 15, when you see the abomination of dissolution. Verse 33, when you see all these things. Not when you hear about it. Not when someone explains it to you. When you see it. These are visible, observable events. And whoever sees them is the audience of verse 34. Which raises the obvious question. Who is you? At first, it sounds like Jesus means only the 12 men sitting there on the hill. And he is certainly speaking to them. But test it against history. Did all 12 disciples flee Judea after seeing the abomination of dissolution? Did all 12 watch the sun go dark and the powers of heaven shake? Did all 12 see the Son of Man coming on the clouds? No, several of them were dead long before Jerusalem fell. So Jesus is doing something he does elsewhere. He speaks to the men in front of him as representatives of everyone who would follow them. He does the same thing at the end of Matthew. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Was that command only for 11 men? Obviously not. It reaches every generation of believers since. He does it again in John 17. He prays for the disciples in the room, and then he says, I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. The audience widens without Jesus changing who he is looking at. So we cannot just assume every you in Matthew 24 stops with the man on the hillside. The context has to tell us. And now we come to the question everything rests on. When Jesus says all these things, how far back does that phrase reach? Look at what sits immediately before the fig tree. Matthew 24, 29 through 31. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect. That is the last thing Jesus describes before he says, when you see all these things, the sun darkened, the Son of Man visible in the sky, the angels sent out, the elect gathered. And there is no signal in the text telling you to leave those verses out. No break, no transition, nothing that says, now I'm only talking about the temple again. The fig tree comes right after them and gathers up everything he just said. So if someone wants to argue that all these things covers only the fall of Jerusalem and excludes verses 29 to 31, they have to show you where the text makes that cut, and the text does not make it. That is where the evidence lands. View 3 is out. The word does not mean a race. View 1 has real strength, and I will not pretend otherwise. Matthew's pattern is 7 for 7 within 40 years in the lifetime of people who heard him say it. But view 2 accounts for something view 1 has to work hard to explain. The disciples asked 3 questions. Jesus answered all 3, and the fig tree gathers up everything he described, including his visible return. And here is the part I want you to hold on to. View 2 does not require changing the meaning of a single word. Not one. Genea still means a generation of people alive at the same time, exactly as the BDAC says, and exactly as Matthew uses it everywhere else. The word never moved, only the people it points to. So go back to that charge from the beginning. Jesus made a prediction and it failed. It did not fail. He told those men their temple would come down, and about 40 years later, Rome tore it apart, stone by stone. He told them exactly what to watch for, and the ones who watched got out alive. Not one word of it fell to the ground. And he told them what to watch for at the end, and he tied it to a fig tree so that the generation who sees it would recognize the season they are standing in. The critics read this verse and see a failed prophet. Read the whole chapter and you find a man who told the truth about the near thing and the far thing and never once got either of them wrong. Now, let me say something to you directly. There is a real danger in a study like this, and I have seen it in people. And if I am honest, I have felt it in myself. You can spend years on prophecy, charts, timelines, tribulation views, the order of the signs. You can hold a position on Matthew 24 that you can defend against anybody, and you can arrive at the end of your life having studied the return of Jesus without ever knowing Jesus. That is not a small thing. Think about what these verses are actually describing. Not a doctrine, a person coming back. And the whole point of knowing when is being ready for who. So let me ask you the only question in this study that really matters. When he comes, will he know you? Not do you know about him? Not can you name the 3 views? Not do you have the timeline right? Does he know you? And do you know him? Because knowing his name is not the same thing as knowing him. You can get every verse in this chapter correct and still be a stranger to the man in the clouds. If that is where you are, you do not need a better prophecy chart. You need him, and he is not hard to reach. Tell him plainly where you are. Tell him you have studied him from a distance and you want to actually know him. Tell him you want to be ready, not just be informed. He has never turned away a person who came to him like that. Not once. John 6:37. Whoever comes to me, I will never cast out. Whoever. That includes you right where you are sitting. One day, the sky will open. Make sure the one who steps out of it knows your name. While I was studying to answer James' question, I found something I was not looking for. Matthew 24 says several things about what people today call the rapture, and they are sitting right there in the text where almost nobody looks. That is the next study. You will want to be there for it. If this deep dive helped you, leave a comment with 2 words, scripture first. And if you have a question that has puzzled you, put it below. Yours could be next. And I want you to know, knowing about him is not the same thing as knowing him. If you want to know what knowing him means, click on the video that is popping up right now. Make sure that when he comes, he can never say, I never knew you. This is pure Bible. If the Bible says it, we say it. If the Bible does not say it, we do not say it. Thank you for watching. The next video goes even deeper, and God richly bless you.